Good afternoon. Welcome to another lecture at the Linoleum Animation Festival. Now we're gonna talk about animation in the context of new media and how it changes under the influence of performance, games, artificial intelligence, and virtual reality. Today with us is Oleksandr Sirous, who will be the one sharing this interesting information with you. He has experience of working with CG graphics and animation, and he worked on different animation projects with 2D, 3D, 360, and VR. Alexander, welcome. Hi, everyone. I guess we can get started. Yeah. Before I get to the topic of today's presentation, I'd like to say a couple of words about myself. I've been working with animation for more than 5 years now. And given the fact that I worked with concept art, developed concepts for animation projects, films, before that, I also went to art school and academy. And now I'm gonna tell a little bit about my background so that you better understand my path, why I became interested in what is the place of animation in the contemporary world, in our reality, and what it looks like now. I've been working with animation for a while now. I started with concept art. Afterwards, I worked with game studios, film studios. I tried different techniques, technologies, approaches, and principles. I started with digital techniques such as 2D animation, frame-by-frame, animation in After Effects, and many other similar techniques. So for quite a long period of time, I was working with these techniques. Also, when working in different industries, I gained experience of working with 3D post-production, as well as work with different software. And this allowed me to gain lots of knowledge in different areas that are animation related. And as I started with digital media, digital tools in animation, and only at a later stage, also tried working with analog ones. For example, I tried working with analog frame-by-frame animation, where you're using the table with a special lamp, stop motion. I tried to try all possible techniques because I had a very strong feeling as if you cannot come up with something new. You cannot be better in terms of finding something new after all of the experience created by other animators over the period of existence of this medium. I tried experimenting with 2D animation. I looked for different unusual, interesting authors. I looked for their animation. I tried to look for the approaches that would not be ordinary. I followed different animation schools who are promoting non-standard approach to animation. And in general still, that didn't give me a feeling that I'm contributing something to animation. I had a feeling that I'm at the dead end. And I didn't understand what animation were, what it is as of now. And being in this state that took some time, also being stuck Like that, I also became interested in new media art, performance, creating electronic music. I got interested in different party culture, DJing, which also forced me to once again ask myself, where is the place of animation in it all? What does it look like? But on the other hand, it also opened new doors and opportunities. It allowed me to look at animation from a totally different angle. At least the way I saw it before that appeared to be a small cube that I was stuck in, and it was quite limited. Because for a long time, I was learning how to work with animation according to some things that are widely accepted. And it was difficult for me to cross some boundaries. But later, when I learned more about other media, such as performances, installations, VJing, it helped me to broaden my perception and my attitude towards animation. It kind of gave me an opportunity to go back to animation, but approach it in a different way. Yes. And respectfully, I was all the time bothered by what's gonna be next in animation. And I realized that I have to understand what is currently happening in animation. And to figure that out, you have to understand what had been happening with it up till now. What important events, what important personalities had an impact and influence on animation, and led it to being the way it is now. That is why I started studying different sources, books on history of animation, and I especially would like to recommend you, I guess this is a 4 volumes. The name of the author is quite complicated. I cannot recall it now. In any case, I think that this is the most extended piece dedicated to history of animation. There are lots of them. They were published over a number of years. And all of these sources helped me to gradually understand what had been happening with animation in the past. And many of these processes are the ones that I observe now in present day reality. All of these processes seem to be moving in circles, and at some time later they repeat. And knowing the history, it is easier to see them and to trace them. It is as if you see. It is in the same context. It happened the same way 100 years ago. That is why now we will quickly look into the past, how it all started, so that we can better understand what I will be talking about next. Yes, so what happened in the past? Animation, initially, for a long time, was not considered to be art. Nobody could even think that one day animation will be equal to theater or paintings, that it will be equal to those kinds of art. Everybody thought that this is just something to have fun, something used for entertainment, fairs, or for a narrow group of rich people. And it was demonstrated as a toy. And it was like that for a long time. This was a new technology when in the mid 1800s, certain things were created that helped you show animation. It was still the beginning phase, and nobody could talk about large scale of this kind of art. And the same happened with films. It started its history at the same time as animation, and they were a symbiosis. And all of the technologies, they were related to one another. Next, animation as a show. This is the first thing that I would like to talk about. Here you can see names of two quite important personalities who had an impact on animation by turning it not into simply some entertainment as some kind of a village fair. They turned it into a real live theater show for a large amount of people. And the first person I'd like to mention is Emil Cole, a person who is officially considered to be his film Phantasmagory, that is considered to be the first animated film in the world, even though clearly before that there were people, scientists, who came up with different types of kinetoscopes. The one that was invented by Renault, that was forgotten partially because of Lumiere brothers. So yes, there were those people who were already engaged in animation, but it was not yet called like that. That is why creator of the first animated film is considered to be Emil Cole. And he is the one who brought this show trace into animation, something that you really wanted to follow, that you wanted to observe. Because before that, animation would lose to film, because films were more impressive. People could see motion pictures, something that was happening around them. They could not believe that. But it was quite different with animation. And Emil Cole was one of the first who laid the foundation for the entertainment in animation, which at a later stage had a very strong impact on animation. And his film Phantasmagory is one, well, how do I put it? This is drawn animation, frame by frame, quite minimalistic, but still very expressive. The next person I would like to say a couple of words about is Winsor McCay. This is the person who brought the animation to an unprecedented level. He pretty much leveled films and animation. He brought animation to the same level as the films were at. And at the same time, he's considered to be an inventor of very many technologies, such as key animation. All that came to being when he was creating his films. His most popular film is about a dinosaur. It was a cycle of films. This was an animation, and many of the rules for the animators are the ones that were created by McCay. How physics works in this environment, and how can you make object feel heavier so that these dinosaurs, so that you can feel their weight. He thought of that back in the 1900s, when nobody really was thinking about animation that much. Even among elite groups of people, he was arguing with his acquaintances that he will revive animation, and he partially managed to do so.
He included lots of new technical and ideas. He presented a vector which was followed by Disney further on, who adores McCay, and is excited about him and considers him to be an example. Thus, animation has become sensitively more important as a separate type of art. But also simultaneously, from the other hand, coming to animation, we can look at it from the perspective of the experiment platform. All of that was in the same beginning of animation, when everything has been just shaped and formed just a century ago, when everything was just coming together into one certain substance. And here, it's worth mentioning, in my subjective opinion, I took two personalities, in fact. There were much more of them, because there were lots of experimenters. The ones who experimented with different techniques, those were Vladislav Starevich, who experimented with stop-motion animation and created animation with insects, and further on, consequently, the incredibly complicated dolls constructions. But I chose those people because they, within the history, were interesting for me. In my opinion, they impacted a lot onto the further development of animation, and they formed the certain branches and directions and trends which still exist now, like James Blackton, the person who is considered to be an inventor of stop-motion animation, as the cinema director, who's just accidentally was moving objects on the stage, and he just saw that those pixelation technique created the movement, ridiculous movement of those objects. So he has lots of interesting both cinema and animation experimental works. That is why he's really an interesting author, with whom it's really worth getting acquainted with. And the next one is Norman McLaren, whom I consider to be an incredibly talented and just superior author. He's just a representative of underground animation, the person who in fact has launched partially the direction of this auteur animation and created an incredible impact into animation as it is. He experimented with lots of techniques and styles. He was working with pixelation, with cinema, with theater, and he, in fact, was the embodiment of the mix of totally different styles. What we can see in modern art, well, at least was tried to achieve by McLaren. He experimented with the sound, he drew on the film, and he was trying to create synchronization of the sound with what is going on the screen. That is why his investment is considered to be incredibly huge. He invested a lot into animation, when simultaneously you could observe how a totally different branch and trend in animation grew. That is Disney, who invested and showed animation from a different side. He showed that it can be totally accessible to everyone, to the wide circle of people. It can be very high scale, and also he invested lots of technical innovations which helped to create really huge and complicated in their development projects. And just after such people like McLaren or Disney, animation has become at the same level it equalized with some other great types of art, like painting or theater. Animation stopped to being perceived as something not that serious, the one which will pass soon. everybody decided to perceive it as something separate and rather weightful. So after that, in the animation, we could see different paths and ways along which the animation is moving along. And that is why it's much more complicated to follow which direction it is leaving now, because partially it becomes to mimic into other media. What do we have after that? That is why it's not that easy to imagine this comprehensive image and way how animation does it today, as there are lots of different and diverse trends, and as we are in a kind of an epoch of post or meta-modernism, when simultaneously we can have lots of different trends existing, and they exist mostly even without touching each other. They're just totally separate, as there are so many people in the world, both artists. That is why we do have so many simultaneous trends and parallel ones, but all the events which took place before, they help us to follow this cutback, how certain processes are formed, how the change of one trend is taking place. And now we'll try to understand how and when this change is taking place and which trends exist now. And the first thing I'd like to mention, well, I was trying to separate several blocks or trends, which I consider to be the driving ones of the modern animation, the driving layers, which we should drive our attention to. The first thing I'd like to tell you about is collaboration and also the mix or combination of styles and formats. Nowadays, lots of platforms and authors begin to collaborate with each other, and they create some interesting and unusual projects, as there are lots of animators and film directors. It could seem that separately it's not that easy to shout out, and to shout out in your peculiar way when you're on your own. But when you're with someone, when there are several of you and you have different views onto the current events, partially it's so complicated when you're on your own. It's not that easy to create something new or something powerful. You should have lots of stamina and patience and self-control for that. That is why there are lots of unions now, platforms, which create the projects where the authors, in this or that way, cooperate with each other or interact. And either they are uniting different styles of those authors, and there are lots of formats like that. Those are video clips, animation TV series, some of the separate genres, the beginnings of the TV series. There will be an example of a very famous platform with the openings and animation movies, short movies, full-length movies. So all of these principle of collaboration, it could be totally different, and it's not that easy to name any of them precisely, because there can be lots of them. But let us consider at least several examples how it's implemented and how it looks like. Here's three examples. The first of them is STOP, Swingyong Tenzan, that is the platform or the group which consists of the graduates of the French school Gobelins, who gathered together and decided to create certain common projects. Let us see how it is all implemented. So in fact, though they are from the same school, this is not totally cardinally different or over-experimental. This is precisely a certain vision, the certain style of this school. But even within it, each of the participants of this group sees and approaches this animation in his or her own way through the animation. Let us watch.
Yo, Francois, look at this. What the fuck is that? Oh shit! Oh shit! Oh shit! Oh shit!
Так, следующий.
Okay, the next example is the opening of Rick and Morty.
What an idiot, Rick. I'm not gonna drop. Here we go. Only one of us is getting out of here, Morty. Enough talk, old man. Come here and fight me!
Вот, здесь как раз
So here we can precisely see the difference of the styles. And they like this format so much that they create such openings on a permanent basis where they invite totally diverse authors. This is both a cool opportunity for different authors who are not that famous on their own to take part in such a project. It's a rather nice opportunity, and still you can see that the narrative and the storytelling itself is rather wholesome. But all of that includes totally different stylistics. And the next example is the collaboration of the Ukrainian animators, where I was also lucky to take part in. Let us watch it as well.
как это все выглядит.
How it all looks like. So here it was. It's rather interesting, in fact, to see yourself in the context with other authors and to see how you look like, how your style and your approach look like in comparison with other animations. It makes you fresher. It gives you the new approach and inspires you. And the next topic, which is rather interesting to talk about, is bugs, mistakes, and randomness element. What in fact I didn't like for a long time in animation, and what made me stagnate, is that when you are creating something, you do that, for instance, along the storyboard. You know, in fact, for about 100% or maybe 90 or 80% what will be in the end. When you do that along the key frames and you create the animation, you've got the first and the last frame, you know. When you do something in between, you know what is in the beginning and what will be in the end. And in fact, this very moment put me in this frozen state. So in the end of the day, analyzing it for a long time and trying to understand how we can approach the process of animation creation in a different way, I began to face rather interesting examples. I will not show you all of them, well, because all the authors which I chose have been heard by you, like David O'Reilly or Nikita Diacour. Those are rather well-known names lately. And of course, before them, this principle was used by lots of authors. The very mentioned above McLaren, who used to use the errors methodology, or this experimental moment that you don't know what will be in the end. But I took those authors exactly because using their examples, it's understandable and accessible how to understand this idea. They exactly, as it seems to me, show this post-meta modernism where we are now at. And using their example, we can see how a certain structure and perception of animation, which used to be before post-meta modern. So we can certainly see this border, this limit, this edge. Comparing it to something new, we can see what we were before in. So those guys, with their weird, awkward, ugly, unusual animation, ugly is the name of the word of the movie by Nikita Diacour, we can see how they ridicule, how they contradict all of things they have with all the canon, like Disney, like Pixar, those canons, which are totally stable during the years. They in fact expressed this exhaustion opinion and suggested something new. Well, maybe not them exactly, but when we speak about all of the other, maybe not that known authors who used to do that even before those guys, but thanks to their works, we can see this transition to the next level or stage of animation, both from the technical and idea points of view. How the authors begin to rethink the beauty, even the attitude to different points. All of that is done through animation. And now let us consider several works of David O'Reilly and the movie Ugly by Nikita Diacour. So first in this long line is Octocat, like the first one of the first works of O'Reilly.
What's in that box? What's up? Nice cup of tea. Cup of tea. Maybe relaxing. I will find my parents. I will find my parents.
Вот, не буду...
Here it is. I won't show you the whole work of this. This work was even shown as a performance more, because it was presented from behalf of a boy with either certain mental issues or anything. So everything like that looks like a performance. This awkward drawing, that the thing that it was done in paint, the whole process itself has more sense than any result. And this is already a different approach. And this upside-down movement, in comparison with what was going on in animation, gives us certain freshness. And O'Reilly is not doing those bugs and mistakes. They seem to be totally conscious, as if he's thinking them through beforehand, not like Diacour, how we will see that further on, but still, at the level of the idea, he's definitely going to bugs and speaking about mistakes, which are beyond the frames. Everywhere, he's trying to think them through. Even if you look at his series for Adventure Time, it is about that, about bugs, about the broken world. And the dialogues, this new idea that we are living in the matrix, in the virtual space, which could be totally broken. All the tension of those thoughts is coming through those films. This is his movie External World, which is maybe the most popular out of all of his works. It also has a lot about mistakes and errors and bugs.
Вот.
It's like this. The next one in the queue is the film by Nikita Diacour.
То есть вы видите, как он вообще передает с точки зрения визуала, текстуры.
So you can see that he is giving through the visual and texture.
Are destined for a change. Based on a true story from the internet, featuring aerial footage, gripping action, and emotions, all performed by computer-simulated puppets, comes a story of true...
Вот, и...
Like this. And Diacour has more of certain technical issues, like the simulation in the 3D space allows the artist, the animator, the director to generate the totally unpredictable situations, totally unpredictable moments and episodes, and this is how the majority of the film is based upon, which creates the interest within the process, that you yourself don't know which result will be achieved in the end of the day creating your film. And of course, at the level of the idea, everything is solved through the main protagonist, the ugly cat, and other similar characters. All of that is really well connected and interconnected. And also I will show you separately my piece which I created for Knock Knock project, as I was trying to use here the same simulation of physics which gave totally unpredictable results in the end, outcomes which were totally full of iterations. They are totally saved in the drafts and they totally look in the different way. So in fact I just put, as it's done in the theater, different dolls, and I just launch the process and I look at the result. And this is how this process becomes interesting for me. Yes, those are just 3 seconds, but still. Then I will mention a bit about animation in AR VR. I will not talk too much about that, as it's one of the most popular topics lately, and I don't consider that it's anything which needs too much of attention. But here we'll consider one example in augmented reality of an Israeli author, Iran Hilali, who's both technically and visually has an interesting approach to this and created an entertaining game. The gaming, which we will, in fact, the topic which we'll approach soon. So this is the new milestone and the new opportunities, what we need to think about, as those are new realities where we can totally differently feel and see and hear, and the content will be felt in a different way as well.
Oh, hello. I'm so glad you're here. I've been waiting so long for someone to show up. To be honest, it's pretty lonely around here. Tell me, what is your name?
My name is Michael.
Nice to meet you, Michael. I really need your help. I need to plant a beautiful garden so that other people will come visit me and I can make more friends. But I don't have arms. So please take this seed and plant it somewhere. Well, it's a start, Michael.
Вот, там как
Like that. So it's interesting to follow how the auteur styles of this animator is combined with a very interesting technical setup of this certain game, where in fact you can throw a seed and grow the tree, and then this entity has some AI within it, an artificial intelligence, which is a rather complicated technology, which I also tried to work with. And this setup altogether creates a very interesting project, where the animation is the add-on to the whole setup with an artificial intelligence, with some interesting mechanics, and all of that is combined into such an interesting thing in the end. So this is out of what's interesting in the AR. The next thing I'd like to mention is the algorithmic or procedural animation. There's a lot of it now, and it emerged long ago as well. And now we've got lots of apps which allow us to create algorithmic animation, like Houdini, and already some other 3D apps like Blender, like Cinema. So procedural animation means that you create the movement of the object without manually moving it from point A to point B, but you just write a certain algorithm which allows to create certain animations, either the math formulas or a certain node structure which allows to combine those nodes within themselves to create and generate animation which you can't always predict beforehand in certain cases, but in certain cases you definitely know what will be in the end, so you just design the structure procedurally. You do not manually move the objects or the dice, and you do that with certain algorithms or functions, nodes or codes in this way, which again leads to certain new and interesting outcomes which are totally unpredictable. It leads to the new visual styles emerging, new visual moves. So a couple of interesting representatives who are definitely using procedural or algorithmic animation in their video clips are Apex Twin and Max Cooper. Let's watch some bits of their video clips.
От.
Here it is. And the next thing that is very exciting for me lately is AI in animation, artificial intelligence, how it is used, how animation can interact with it. And now it is an area that is just emerging. And different animation actors are only starting to look that way. That is what makes it even more interesting, because it pretty much now is an empty sheet of paper which allows you to do lots of things. And there is a lot of space for trying out different things. Even though AI and using 3D graphics for visualization of AI and different processes with the help of artificial intelligence and using 3D graphics is something that happened even back in 1994. There was a well-known video where you can see evolution of different creatures created from simple geometrical shapes, which with the help of artificial intelligence are learning to walk. Now we're gonna look at a small example of how Google's DeepMind developed certain thing, what it looks like. And I think that even this video alone will help you to understand how that can be used in animation.
Вот, интересно.
An interesting thing here is that these creatures that are made up of lines of code, which determines their behavior, basically gives them different behavior types. The weights that are in the neural system help to choose certain behavior depending on what should be the outcome of the action done by this creature, what it should behave like next time. And that is why we see some unpredicted actions. It can be generated forever. These creatures can behave in very unobvious ways. And this is something that that makes you want to interact with it, to launch the virtual environment and allow them to create animation on their own. I think that animator can become the programmer who is already laying the foundation, creating a certain idea, because you cannot do anything without an idea. Without an idea, it just loses any point. This little dummy figure is running in a really funny way, and you can do that manually, or you can simply write down or find some neural network that will, on its own, find some silly and funny way to keep balance. And I'd like to show you one of my projects. This is just a small bit. The project is 5 to 7 hours of YouTube stream with an algorithm neural network. And these creatures made them move and eat these spheres. And in the course of this quite a lengthy period of time, I wanted to observe how their behavior will be changing, and it truly changed. First, they could not even stand up, and then they started doing some interesting actions. And the thing that I liked the most is that the process of developing and working with animation was completely different. So I laid certain type of foundation, creating certain mechanism, then afterwards independently generated what was happening on the screen.
Вот, еще, конечно, процент случаев.
And also, actions can be different because they bump at one another, because they interact, and they're learning from their experience. That is why they start behaving different with every time they try to do something. And therefore, it can lead to some unpredicted results, which in my opinion is quite an interesting thing. And one of the final things is animation and animation production in real time. I also think about it a lot. And namely, about how you can change the process of animation creation at all levels. How can you approach, normally we have production and we have post-production, when we are adding sounds, when we're editing it, putting the video and the audio together. And lately, this process seemed boring to me, and it was very difficult for me to start working on it and to work with it. That is why I thought, how can I circumvent it? How can I approach it in a different manner? And due to the fact that I've been involved in VJing for a while now, I'm creating visual images for the musicians in real time using MIDI keyboards so that I can control animation in real-time mode. I realized that this is a great opportunity. It allows you to create films, create them in real-time mode. So you can do music and the visual part, and all of that can be happening in parallel. And it can also have influence on one another, which can in principle change the pipeline of animated films development. These are the first attempts of the sound influence in video. This is what I tried to do.
Вот, и...
Now I'm gonna show you a bit of my VJing from Berlin. This is when I started thinking about rethinking production and work on animation and how you put it all together in the end. This video may be of poor quality, but here you can see how the visual component is fused with the musical component. This is the most important part of doing VJing, when you have to fit the same rhythm, the same mood with the musician, so that your visual component conveys the mood, conveys emotions that will resonate with music. Here is one more bit without a sound. What I was doing, I was using different controllers. All of the visual part that you can see here is happening thanks to MIDI controllers, different buttons. All this is layered over one another and generated in real-time mode. I try working with different parameters, and I'm trying to experiment with how you can influence them in real-time mode, how you can change the colors, and it all can interact with music. And finally, performance and games and virtual online environments. This is also an incredible field for use of animation. And the author in that book, made up of several volumes, also says that games are a medium that is only the initial point of its development. But again, games are not being perceived seriously by many people. Now it is seen as entertainment, simply being the period of when technologies are being developed. So the same as it used to be with animation back in the time. But now time runs faster. That is why development of games as art is also growing rapid. So games as industry is growing and expanding. Now they earn in gaming more than in filmmaking. It is being rethought. And there are multiple examples of how games using different mechanics, interaction with virtual animated environment in real time, and an opportunity to also use it all online to connect people in virtual environment, people who are in different parts of the world. Seems to be quite an interesting thing. And now I'd like to demonstrate you a couple of examples. I'm gonna skip this one. For example, this was done by me at Residency American Arts Incubator. It was created for virtual environment, multi-user, so many users can be present there at the same time. The task was also to work with artificial intelligence present here in the form of chatbots communicating with you. And also I really wanted to cause certain emotion with this piece. Let's have a look.
Вот, то есть
Here I tried to open up the opportunities that immersion gives us, that games give us. Here, for example, we have this large bubble, and with a small bubble can move on it. It has its own gravitation. But at the same time, we can fly off to the emptiness and stay there. The change of feelings and the opportunity for a user to study the space seems quite interesting to me. You can get to a totally different surface, and in this space you can hear some voices chatting with one another, who are chatbots from the neural networks that can also address you. And this whole process, as well as the outcome, inspires me a lot, inspires me to grow and work on this. And also, I'd like to demonstrate your project created together with really cool guys, Photinus Studio. This is our performance. This is a trailer of the performance, but performance took place in the virtual environment, using everything that game mechanics can provide us with. We tried to approach it from a different angle, to look at it from a different angle. We used very many different technologies. Everybody had their own avatar, and everybody was controlling their avatar in a very trivial way. Some did it with the help of the neural network that was reading their feeds. The others with the music that they were creating in real time, and all the signals were conveyed. So from the technical viewpoint, it was quite a complex setup, but at the same time very interesting. We wanted to rethink it and totally different approach the interaction in the virtual environment in a different way, because everybody knows that there is a keyboard and a computer mouse, and we try to approach it from a different perspective, take a different look at it. And the way it looks visually, I believe also is quite interesting. And the performance itself, the space itself, and interaction in it is quite interesting. Let's have a look.
Вот.
Here it is. And finally, I'd like to say that for me, animation, as Norman McLaurin said back in the day, is not keyframes, not spacing or timing. This is a feeling, an emotion, a thought that we convey with the help of movement. And it seems to me that now it is very interesting to observe how animation is developing and in what direction it is moving. Sasha, thank you very much for this presentation. Now we have Q&A session. If you have any questions, please send us comments under this video. We have a question. I would like you to elaborate about Netflix Love, Death and Robots, because this project is something that one of our viewers liked a lot, especially the concept and the visuals. She'd like to find out about your opinion regarding this project. But I would like to also add that now streaming platforms are the ones who are dictating what should be filmed in what way and what should be the techniques applied. And in animation, we also see lots of different techniques being fused together when you cannot differentiate 2D from 3D. So could you please comment upon this a little bit? And where are we headed? Yes, this is true. Now streaming platforms are leading. I believe that the majority of time is being spent on streaming platforms. And before Love, Death and Robots were created, there were guys from Moscow who were creating a cartoon where it is hard to differentiate 2D from 3D. Many people said that it is 2D, even though it was 3D, according to them. I talked to them, and they were talking to a feature when he was picking the teams of people, and it is great that he was looking for these teams. And I've read that they are also planning to proceed with the second season of Love, Death and Robots. And this is a great trend. It gives opportunity to different teams, well-known creators such as Alberto Mielga. His episode is number 3 on Love, Death and Robots. He was well-known back then to show their style, their approach, and it is also united. There is like a common denominator to it all. That is why Love, Death and Robots is a very interesting project. And everybody can find something to their liking there, because there are many different styles combined. And I think that this is happening because of an abundance of films, authors, creators. That is why this kind of collaborations or anthologies is something that will become trendy, that will become constant, because now we see it from time to time in music videos, on Netflix. I believe that they were the first doing it that way. And there are also several films that I like a lot. Some don't seem to be that interesting, they seem more of a commercial nature, but my favorite one is by Alberto Mielgo. He has very interesting technical approach to implementing it all, and he has interesting vision of animation. One more question. Your forecast for the upcoming 2 years, because it is true that animation now is omnipresent. It complements something. Other things are just emerging and evolving. And I have a question about Unity. Now animation, not even now, I think that it started a bit earlier. It is being created with game engines, and I went to a festival in Belgium. A first animated film created with the help of this engine was presented there. How do you think? Where are we headed from now on? What kind of animation is awaiting for us in the couple of coming years? Well, it's hard to see how we will be perceiving it as the viewers, how we will be consuming it, because currently, as I have demonstrated, there are different approaches to content consumption. It can be done with the help of gaming, screen, different other means of augmented virtual reality. But the trend of using game engines, which was also emphasized by, I fail to recall his name, Alberto Bernadotti. I keep recommending this book, Gian Alberto Bendati. Right, Bendati. Because he dedicated quite some time to game engines. This is like the live theaters, when the authors were trying to bring everything to life and show it in a new way. I think that game engines also at least allow you to simulate different actions, physics, manipulations. It all can happen as if on set. When you're moving these 3D actors, and at the same time they're living a life of their own, you control them. So this unpredictability, it multiplies with incredible speed thanks to these engines, because their main advantage compared to other software that you work with, working on 3D, is that in real time they can help you get any picture, any details. If you need a very realistic environment and you want to keep playing with it, interacting with it, you can do that in real time. You take a camera, start walking with it around, and now there are lots of opportunities that allow you to immerse in this virtual world, allow you to create completely unpredictable situations. And of course, game engines allow you to create virtual environments with characters that have artificial intelligence who can interact with you. At the same time, they have very interesting animation that can be developed in procedural way. And there can be lots of people who are interacting with one another and these characters, and all of it can become something completely new. And now when we are all on a lockdown, these virtual things will be expanding. It is clear that it still is emerging, the same as VR. At the beginning, it was not the same as it now, and soon VR glasses will be like the sunglasses I'm wearing now, and it will help us to see virtual and augmented realities. And it seems to me that work with virtual environment, they were thinking on how we can behave in that environment, how we can interact with the virtual world, how we can interact with the visual language that you fill it up with. This gives us a lot of space for imagination and future development for the creators. How would you characterize VJing and generative animation in Ukraine? Does it have any prospects? Well, in Ukraine, this is quite a complicated VJing scene. Being a part of it at the moment, I have positive vision and positive forecast that it all will be developing. Of course, now during lockdown, everybody's trying to come up with the ways of taking it online, how you can organize parties. Everybody thinks and comes up with different setups so that it is not boring, but at the same time not happening physically. In general, I think Ukraine is quite an awesome country for parties, raves, because we have lots of long-forgotten buildings and places. And I think that in this kind of countries, this underground movement and rave movement is emerging, both from the viewpoint of visual, VJing, different experiments, discoveries, because there are guys in the underground doing something, discovering something new that not many people are aware of. There are many different discoveries, both technical and others, that can be used in production and post-production, just that few people are aware of that. But I think that future is great, even if we're on a lockdown. I believe that we're gonna come up with fun setups, and there is gonna be a lot of followers for all that. Sasha, thank you once again.